This audio blog is brought to you by How to Say FU Politely, Satya, Mind, Body, Spirit, Health, and Healing, and read by the author, Tyson Ray. Why I dropped out of grad school and quit my job working within the public school system, Part 1. Additional thoughts. I recently came across a few pages I had saved from an otherwise burned school counseling textbook entitled Exploring School Counseling. I immediately recognized why I had chosen to save these pages and was momentarily shocked as I re-examined what lay therein. They addressed much of what I have written about in the pages of this blog and also what will be discussed within the sequel. I briefly felt, oh shit! Maybe I've made a big mistake. But it only takes a few seconds to remember that I am not writing about the ideals and course material I encountered in an assigned textbook or class. I am recounting what I actually found and experienced in grad school and working within the public school system, an entirely different reality, far from any intellectual fantasy about how things might look someday in the future. It's easy to draw fanciful conclusions and make nice-sounding proposals from the outside looking in, when you are not entrenched in the true nature of how things actually are. It is only fair that I share a few excerpts from the chapter of the book called Advocacy, as what they contained was thoughtful, meaningful, and potentially valuable. From Exploring School Counseling. Those in the school counseling profession have, quote, talked a good game, unquote, for many years, contending that school counselors are leaders of change. However, when speaking of change, school counselors' focus was primarily on change in the school counseling program, developing the school counselor's role description, and increasing the number of counselors in the schools. All of these issues are worthy arenas for advocating change and growth. Yet, today's society demands a different type of advocacy role for school counselors. The new vision for today's school counselors is as advocates for the academic success of all students in an equitable environment. My thoughts. Key words, quote, equitable environment, unquote. From Exploring School Counseling. Because existing barriers sometimes seem to block advocacy actions, some counselors choose the path of least resistance, avoiding their advocacy role. School counselors sometimes give varied reasons or excuses as to why they stop short of acting on the behalf of the student. Personal obstacles might include fear or anxiety about speaking up, being labeled as a troublemaker, being apathetic, and a false sense of powerlessness. My thoughts. The use of the word quote unquote sometimes in the first sentence of this excerpt is laughable for reasons I feel are quite obvious. What is noted here is also far from limited to school counselors. In my experience, it can be applied to anyone working within the school system who is interested in real change. And I would ask whoever wrote this, what do you mean, quote, false sense of powerlessness, unquote? The entire system is rigged against change. I attempted to challenge the system for 6 years in my role as a social worker, and the powerlessness seemed anything but a, quote, false sense, unquote. More from Exploring School Counseling. Some may feel that they are intimidated by what might happen if they stand up for students, especially if other school personnel disagree. These and other concerns may result in professional paralysis that results in no action by the school counselor. While these are legitimate feelings, school counselors must realize their important role in advocacy for students, for programs, for self. Failure to do so could result in detrimental experiences for students, families, and for the school counseling program in general. My thoughts. This definitely describes the experience of one who is attempting to advocate for students and overall change within the school system. I would add that while, quote, failure to do so could result in detrimental experiences for students, families, etc., unquote, proceeding with this sort of advocacy in a manner that would necessarily challenge many others working at the school could also result in being fired. More from Exploring School Counseling. The school counselor should, above all else, be an advocate for students. Parents or teachers may become caught in power struggles or emotionally entrenched in a situation. The school counselor must always step back and say, what is in the best interest of the student? This may not always be the easiest stance to take, but it is the school counselor's responsibility to advocate for the child and mediate between the adults involved, if necessary. It is difficult to advocate for something that does not seem beneficial to students. If a school counselor has feelings of discomfort or is hesitant to participate in or lead activities toward or for a cause, he or she should really explore the reasons for hesitancy. Examination of the personal and professional level of commitment and emotional response should either affirm the school counselor's next steps in the advocacy process or encourage the school counselor to develop the skills needed to advocate successfully. If a school counselor feels strongly about a decision or action, he or she must have the passion and commitment to take a stand and be prepared to defend the position. Balancing passion and commitment with the ability to communicate valid reasons for taking a stand is a skill that often takes time to develop and attain finesse. My thoughts. Well, touché. Couldn't have said it better myself. But doesn't this seem like a bit of a tall order? Does this author realize the amount of bureaucratic bullshit a school counselor has to sift through, then juggle? When exactly is all this advocacy going to happen? Does this author realize what happens to employees who attempt to challenge those above them in a hierarchical structure? Does the author realize that said counselor may have bills to pay, a family to support, and therefore a job to keep? And the meeting of resistance is not a quote-unquote if. In my experience, it was faced at every possible turn. Why would anyone willingly sign up to play in a game that they know has been rigged against them? Shit, I hadn't even gotten out of the gate before massive resistance was being hurled my way. And last, but not least, from Exploring School Counseling. One of the most valuable lessons to remember in our school counseling career is that appropriate and ethical decisions are not always popular. However, in order to be an advocate for a student or a cause, school counselors may have to take a stand on what they feel is in the best interest of the involved parties. As a school counselor in training, you will hopefully develop skills to facilitate dialogue, explore issues, and respond to conflict or disagreement. Singh et al. 2010 identified 7 themes that school counselors who self-identify as social justice agents use to advocate for systemic change. 1. Use political savvy to navigate power structures. 2. Consciousness raising. 3. Initiating difficult dialogue. 4. Building intentional relationships. 5. Teaching students self-advocacy skills. 6. Using data for marketing. 7. Educating others about the school counselor role of advocate. My thoughts. Whoever wrote this textbook clearly has an understanding of what is needed within the school system, and more specifically, from school counselors. Unfortunately, there is a monumental disconnect between these ideals and what is actually possible within the confines of the system as is. For instance, at the high school I worked at, likely not vastly different than any other high school, there were 3 school counselors for the 2,000 attending students at the school. Now let's suppose that all 3 counselors were brave and empowered enough to actually advocate on the behalf of the students and stand out among the herd. Unlikely. That is still only 3 people out of an entire staff working towards changing a firmly rooted and entrenched system. What individual counselor is going to be able to consistently shoulder this burden for any extended period of time? Not to mention the complexity of the problems needing addressed, or the resistance and outright disapproval they will meet at every turn. What I am attempting to address is what I actually encountered and bore witness to down here on planet Earth. The reality is that if the real issues are going to be tackled, academics and standardized testing will likely have to take a back seat. The psychological, emotional, and spiritual needs of the students will need to become a primary focus. This is something that is very threatening to those in higher positions of power, who are more interested in things staying the way they are. Really, it is at its most essential the same problem you face when attempting to change any system, whether it be political, economic, healthcare, etc. If it adversely affects the interests of the powerful, it will without fail be made exceedingly difficult to accomplish any meaningful or significant progress or change. I will step into my role as a mind-body-spirit consultant and writer. Working towards advocacy from within a system such as this seems a fool's errand and a waste of precious time. Luckily, the channels of information are no longer limited to a select few, and one can create awareness from the outside, without having to deal with all the hurdles and gatekeepers they would meet trying to change the system from within. Part 2 of this blog will take an in-depth look at what one actually finds when they attempt to, quote, take a stand, unquote, within the public school system. It could be titled, quote, Experiments in Advocacy Within the Public School System, unquote. It is sure to be a good time. Until next time, love your struggle and remain free. If you found this to be meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to support and encourage future creations of this kind. Thank you.